stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am wrapping up my reviews of the player cards in the Boundary Beyond the Second Mythos pack in the Forgotten Age cycle. I'm looking at everyone's favorite this time around, the Survivor cards. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Survivors, I think, receive one of the best cards in this particular pack, so without further ado, let's get started. The first Survivor card in the pack is the level 1 version of Try and Try Again. It's a 2-cost asset that will set you back 1 experience point. It has a willpower skill icon and the talent trait. It uses 3 tries. That's a new one for, I guess, for charges. If Try and Try Again has no tries, discard it. It has the game text response. After a skill test is failed, if a skill card you own is committed to that test, exhaust Try and Try Again and spend 1 try. Return that skill card to your hand. Level 3 Try and Try Again didn't make a big splash in the card pool when it was released in the Lost in Time and Space Mythos pack. Judging by the decks posted over at Arkham DB, a few players experimented with the card, mostly in Ashcan Pete builds, but unfortunately for the most part, level 3 Try and Try Again was largely ignored. That's a bit of a shame because I really quite like the effect. As I mentioned during my Lost in Time and Space review many moons ago, Try and Try Again's effect is similar to that of Rabbit's Foot from the core set, in that both cards reward you with a card for failing a skill test. With Try and Try Again, you know exactly which card you're getting back. If you commit a perception to a skill test during an investigate action and you happen to fail, you get that perception back. That's really good, especially if you're planning to follow up with another investigate action at that location. If you've got Rabbit's Foot in play, you get to draw a card for failing the test, but that card may not necessarily help you if you want to take another investigate action that turn. That said, you are still getting a card back, which is much better than the alternative, which in this case happens to be nothing at all. While I really like level 3 Try and Try Again's effect, there are a couple of factors working against it. First and foremost, many players are reluctant to put cards such as Rabbit's Foot and Try Again in their decks because these cards trigger only if you fail a skill test, which is something most players try to avoid at all costs, even if they're playing on hard or expert difficulty. Now, while I can see their point, I don't really have a problem with planning to fail in the Arkham Horror LCG, because the fact of the matter is that you are going to fail some skill tests while playing this game. The Chaos Bag will make absolutely certain of that, and it will usually do it at the absolutely worst time. If you're playing an investigator such as Calvin Wright, you're going to fail quite a few skill tests before you get rolling during a scenario. Typically, pulling a token from the Chaos Bag is an all-or-nothing proposition. You either succeed or fail. There's no middle ground. Rabbit's Foot and Try and Try Again change the dynamic by creating a third outcome. Now, that outcome is not as good as succeeding at the skill test, but it's nowhere near as bad as failing the skill test either. If you're interested in exploring this dynamic further, I highly recommend that you check out Chris Mooney's spirited defense of Rabbit's Foot in an article posted over at the Mythos Busters website. Mooney's article is well written, and it's very thought-provoking and just plain interesting, and I encourage you to check it out. And while you're there, why don't you listen to the Mythos Busters podcasts if you haven't done so already. Sean, Nick, Ian, and Scott always put on an informative and entertaining show, and I'm a religious listener to myself. They're the guys I listen to if I'm having trouble with the game. The second problem with the level 3 Try and Try Again is that it costs 3 experience points, which is, as we know, a lot for a survivor. Survivors have a lot of powerful upgrades, and I don't think Try and Try Again is strong enough to make the cut in many decks, especially when you can simply play Rabbit's Foot, which is a level 0 card with a similar effect. It doesn't help that level 3 Rabbit's Foot was released in Return to the Night of the Zealot. Level 3 Rabbit's Foot lets you search the top X cards of your deck for the card and draw it, which I think is a little bit stronger than what Try and Try Again is offering. You get that nice card selection, and if you fail a test really badly, you can dig quite deep into your deck for an answer that you can use later that turn. Finally, Try and Try Again also costs 2 resources, which is a lot if you're playing a Survivor deck that includes Dark Horse. And let's be honest, many popular Survivor decks these days are playing Dark Horse for those skill attribute boosts across the board. Level 1 Try and Try Again is essentially identical to its level 3 counterpart. It has 1 less willpower skill icon and has only 3 charges, or in this case, tries. So is level 1 Try and Try Again going to succeed where the level 3 version failed? Well, the Arkham Horror LCG's landscape has changed a lot since level 3 Try and Try Again came out. When you discuss cards that affect skills, 2 investigators should immediately come to mind, those being Min Tae-fan and Silas Marsh. Now, Min can't take the level 3 version of Try and Try Again due to her deck building restrictions, limiting her to level 2 Survivor cards. But that level 1 version of Try and Try Again is fair game for her. If Min has analytical mind in play, she may commit cards to skill tests at other locations, and some of those tests are bound to fail. Try and Try Again may only have 3 tries, but it's a really nice option for Min to have in her back pocket if and when an investigator fails a skill test. She can simply pull that skill back to her hand and commit it to another skill test at a later date. Try and Try Again may also find a home in Silas Marsh. I think there are a few players out there who are putting the level 3 version in his deck already. Silas's response is similar to that of Try and Try Again, but there's absolutely no reason that you can't include either level of this card in your deck for a little extra redundancy. If you are playing Try and Try Again, Silas can pull multiple skill cards back to his hand if a test fails, which is pretty sweet. Finally, there's Calvin Wright, an investigator who is all too accustomed to failing skill tests, at least at the beginning of scenarios, and whenever I happen to play him, it seems. Try and Try Again makes failing those early skill tests a lot less painful. I'd be willing to sacrifice a little bit of tempo to play Try and Try Again if I knew I could get a rise to the occasion back in the event I failed a key skill test, such as an overgrowth on the expedition camp on turn 1, which has happened to me now 4 times in a row. I'm a little bit bitter. I really like Try and Try Again's effects. And honestly, I have lost count of how many times I've committed skill cards to a test, failed that test, and then just longed to have that skill card back in my hand because I just have nothing to show for it because of that tentacle. However, I don't think I'm prepared to pay 3, much less 6 experience points for that type of effect when Rabbit's Foot gives me a card for free. Level 1 Try and Try Again is a much more attractive option. You can use it only 3 times, but that should be enough unless the Chaos Bag is being a real dick during a scenario. So yeah, I like what they've done here by lowering the experience point cost while keeping the card basically the same, just putting a little bit of a limitation on it. The second Survivor card in the pack is Cornered. It's a 2-cost asset that costs 2 experience points. It has willpower and combat skill icons and the talent trait. It has the game text. As a free triggered ability, discard 1 card from your hand. You get +2 skill value for this skill test. Limit once per skill test. Cornered is among the stronger, if not the strongest talent in this pack because it synergizes so well with what many Survivor investigators are already doing in this game. Survivors have very few ways of generating extra resources, which can make it a challenge to use talents such as Scrapper or Plucky to gain skill value bonuses. Cornered gives them the option of using cards instead, and survivors are very adept at recycling cards. Discarding a card from your hand to get a +2 skill value bonus on a test isn't much of a drawback if you've got a way to return that card to your hand using Scavenging, Resourceful, or William York's Response. Or you can play that card from your discard pile using William York or Wendy's Amulet, or you can turn that card into even more skill bonuses with an ally such as Yodel from the Forgotten Age Deluxe expansion. During my review of Improvised Weapon from the Forgotten Age, I mentioned that card would get even better once survivors had some way of discarding that improvised weapon rather than having to play it. We didn't have to wait long because Cornered is that card. Improvised Weapon has no skill icons, but now you can discard it with Cornered for +2 skill value and then play it from your discard pile later in the game to give an enemy -1 fight and gain +1 damage. It's really a match made in heaven. Suddenly, a card with no skill icons like Improvised Weapon suddenly has 2 skill icons, whichever skill icons you happen to need at the time: Willpower, Intellect, Combat, or Agility. That's just fantastic. And the fact that you can play Improvised Weapon from your discard pile later is just icing on the cake. William York can put Cornered to great use as well. If there's an asset York would like to get into play, he can discard it from his hand for the +2 skill value bonus during a combat skill test, and then when he defeats the enemy, York can play the asset from his discard pile. This is just fantastic in terms of pure efficiency. If you're playing Yodel, you can discard a card from your hand for +2 skill value, then trigger Yodel to gain another +1 or +2 skill value as long as it's got a matching skill icon. If you combine Cornered and some of Yodel's other tricks, I think you could hit like +10 skill value, which is more than enough to pass any skill test on hard or expert difficulty, much less easier standard. Those are some hardcore skill value bonuses if you can pull off those tricks. The ability to discard cards from hand also creates interesting possibilities for cards such as Madame Labranche, a survivor asset from A Phantom of Truth, and Last Chance, a survivor skill from the Forgotten Age. Survivors are the masters of playing with few cards and resources, and Cornered really drives that theme home. I think it's only a matter of time before we see an investigator who prefers to play with an empty hand and an empty resource pool rather than being flush with cards and resources. And I think it's really important to point out here that unlike the other talents in this pack, you don't even need to exhaust Cornered to use its ability. When your back is up against the wall, Cornered will always be there to help bail you out as long as you've got a card in your hand. And if you don't happen to have a card in your hand at the time, Madame Labranche can get you one as a free triggered ability during any player window. Really, if you've got Cornered in play, you have got no excuse for not having skill value bonuses at your fingertips. You can simply trigger Labranche, grab the card, and commit it with Cornered, and you're on your way. Really good stuff. Cornered is an amazing addition to the Survivor card pool, and I think it easily ranks among the best cards in this pack. Discarding a card from hand it's such a simple thing, but it opens up so many lines of play for investigators to explore that I really expect players to be talking about this card for months to come, and they are going to find ways of using and abusing it. I can't wait to see what they come up with. That's it for the Survivor cards in the Boundary Beyond. This is a very good pack for survivors. We've seen Try and Try Again before, but I think the level 1 version of this card is going to see more play than its level 3 counterpart. Arkham Horror's Investigator pool has changed a lot since Try and Try Again was released. Lowering the card's experience point cost lets Min experiment with this effect. Silas Marsh and Calvin Wright may also be interested in this card at this price point. As for Cornered, I think it's really the missing piece of the Survivor puzzle. Survivors have always had plenty of ways to get cards back from their discard pile. What they were missing was an easy way to get them there in the first place without having to commit them to a skill test. Cornered solves that problem very nicely, which will make recursion strategies that much better. The fact that they can now discard a card almost at will and get a +2 skill value bonus for doing it is just nothing short of amazing. This is my pick for the best talent in this pack, and quite possibly it's also the best card. Really good stuff for the survivor cards in this pack. That's going to do it for my review. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember to check out the playlist for the reviews of the other cards in this pack when you get the chance. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.